Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Keeping It Real on Purpose. I am your host, Edna White, and you are in the place where we talk about real things, about real life, about real issues, relationships, and business, all on purpose. And today our guest is none other than the illustrious author Wanda Davis. Welcome to Keeping It Real on Purpose.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here today.
Great. We're excited to have you. And I see here you are an author. Can you tell us how you show up as an author in the world?
Well, I've actually been contributor to a few books over the years, but just this past spring, I call it like my baby, was actually launched. So I launched my children's book, From Head to Heart.
Head to
So
heart.
it was, it was like at least a year-long journey of putting it together, and sometimes very patiently having to have patience to wait for things to finish up before I could birth it out into the world.
Okay, all right. And how's that journey been for you as an author?
It was funny because for this book, it was very simple to write. It was kind of a little bit of heart-spoken story that was quickly put together, but it was all the rest of the process of putting a book out there that took the time.
Yeah.
And that was like the learning part of what I needed to, have people edit it. I needed an illustrator, obviously, for a children's book as well. So waiting for each illustration as it was bringing the story to life was kind of a very neat experience as well. And then just getting into, who's going to print it for me, who's going, how is all that going to work? So along that journey was a little bit, it's knowledge, right? You gather the knowledge and wisdom of how to put it out there.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a different take on just putting a blog out. Even a blog needs some thought. And I've even learned that each book has its own goal, and its own goal has it. You could say, okay, the goal for your book is to get this head to heart concept out there and bring it to all the schools. Whereas your new book, maybe another book could be, it's to get to college students. And you want to sell this. Every book has its own goals.
And look at this, she's already giving me more ideas.
But that's what happens,
Right now, exactly. Because I think this will be the beginning of at least a little bit of a couple of series of children's stories.
Yeah.
It's a social emotional story.
So
that's why. But I wrote it as a children's book just so that it's accessible to all ages.
Got you.
This book really has life lessons for any age.
Okay.
So even the person reading the book, say to a very young child, will be able to get stuff out of this book.
That's nice. That's really nice.
I kind of talk about, the top 5 lessons that can be got from this book, and it's really universal. Different ages can get different levels of depth of personal growth, say, from it as well.
Sure. So it's almost like a mommy and me book. Like, have a group of mommies and children read the book to them and almost do like an exercise. That's pretty cool. I like that. I like that.
Yeah, that would actually work very well because I believe that you can get into all sorts of different discussions.
Yeah.
After reading this book, and of course, the level of discussion depends on who you're talking to.
Right.
So if I was to go into schools and do author visits, like the level of discussion that I would have with primary students would be different from junior students to intermediate and high school students.
Right.
And then again, I really would like to do a workshop with it just for adults as well.
Absolutely.
So because the same lessons that we start talking about, and if you want me to go ahead and kind of get into that piece. Yeah, okay. So it starts out with a young girl named Gwen who was bullied.
Okay.
Now, in the book, it doesn't really specifically say what she was bullied about. There's a little bit about she wasn't great as a physical athlete. But as to exactly why she was so, it kind of leaves it open for people to be able to relate to her. It's like, oh, that was kind of me as a kid.
Right.
Or else as a student, being able to recognize maybe what bullying is. So, for a young student, we'd get more into that discussion about what bullying is. Now, I always say, too, it's like the trauma at the beginning of this book was bullying.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the trauma can be anything that is traumatic to the person.
Sure.
So is it like a pandemic? We've just been through several years
Oh, yeah.
of traumatic experiences. So it's like whatever that trauma is, or for a young child, it could be, maybe the death of somebody they loved, or their parents separating. So whatever trauma happens to a person, how do they respond to that?
Right.
So in this book, what the little girl did was, in order to protect herself, she put up a really imaginary, but a big wall around herself.
Mm-hmm.
So, in her mind, it was to help protect her from things. Those insults from other kids weren't going to affect her anymore. But she also buried her feelings. So, kind of, and then, relating to that part of the story about how have you responded to different traumatic events in your life?
Right.
Did you withdraw? Did you talk about it with people? So you can kind of talk about different ways and different strategies of how you might respond to a traumatic event.
Right.
And from there, the young girl in the story, she decides to go into her mind. So that's kind of like the from head part,
Right.
in order to control her life. So being able to control her life from her head without necessarily her emotions being involved.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, again, people can kind of relate, well, where might I have done that in my life?
Mm-hmm.
But it's also showing the young students that this is, perhaps not the best way to respond to this situation. Because what the girl in the story did, she didn't talk about it to her parents. She didn't talk about it with her teachers, right? She just kind of set up this wall around herself.
Right.
But it was eventually, she ends up seeing another little girl being bullied, and she decides to be able to help her because she figures it's probably not good for other people to have walls around themselves. And so, so in this episode of helping somebody else, she decides it's time to help herself. Wow. And so there's this lesson of it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
That's
we're
good.
talking about mental health here.
Yeah.
Withdrawing, perhaps, and the emotional regulation. So it's all a perfect social emotional story here. And we're looking at it in terms of how she responded. How might other people be able to respond? But just the fact of asking for help is okay.
That's great.
It's okay to ask for help. And there's a lot of people right now that are still suffering different anxieties and things from what we've been through the last couple of years. And it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see that this book, From Head to Heart, is literally getting a head start on mental health for children. Because this is a great message for children. It's a great message for them, for their mental health. Exactly. This is great. Yeah. This is really great information. I mean,
that's why I wrote it for all ages, right?
Right.
So starting young, but really anybody who is reading this book can get something out of it.
Right. Okay. That's really good. That's, even as adults, and I'm always talking to my clients about asking for help, You're sitting there choking, you're choking on your business or you're choking in a relationship, but you won't ask for help. And asking for help could be simply just turning your head. Somebody's right there. Help me. Can I need some help? But we don't do it. We don't do it. And this is so good.
For the opportunities.
Yes, the opportunities are there. They happen. And it's good, so good that you're doing this for children because I just had this conversation with my grandson who's 14. And, that's a kind of volatile age between 12 and 14. So really, age, And so he was very hesitant to talk to his parents. And I was like, listen, I would love to have had my parents to kind of speak to. You have both of them. Both of them are very communicative to you. You could. I said, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to have a conversation.
Even if he has that communication line open to you, there's something there.
Yeah.
Right?
He tells me everything. So, it's like he just, booba this
being
and
able to have that line with another
it's very important.
That you can actually even talk things over or ask for help.
Yeah. And that's important.
And so the whole idea of this, and the whole idea idea from the story is eventually she learns, like there's also kind of throughout the stories about being yourself as well.
Ah.
So being true to yourself, kind of knowing yourself, and it's the whole idea. Eventually, she was being bullied for being herself.
Okay.
And so, but it was still okay to be yourself, even though other people don't think much of that. It's more be true to you.
Right.
And, you will be much happier in life. And that's just it, living through the heart as to is kind of the best way to go.
Yeah. And how do you explain being true to yourself or authentic to a child?
And that's a little bit harder, but I guess it's more, you can give some different examples about, what are your likes of foods, right? So everybody, just point out different ways that people are different.
Gotcha.
But everybody's okay being themselves,
okay.
right?
Right.
And so it's the whole idea, you can be yourself. It's like everybody's going to have different likes and dislikes and personality and, but, you are you. And that's why you're unique.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. That's you or you. That's why you're unique. I like that. I like that. That's great. So what inspired you to write this book? What inspired you to do that?
Well, it is partly my own story. I was a little girl who did build a wall around myself. When I was bullied as a young child, I remember doing this when I was like 6 years old. And so part of it, again, is my not wanting other children to want to have to do that as well. So, this whole story is not my story.
Right.
But it does start out as my story. And being able to help kids talk about things more and be able to get things out there in life. Yeah, the story came out of one of my, healing journeys. I was, doing some self-development work and, and then the story got written. It was like, and then it really cried out to be published. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Cries out to be published. That's a whole another issue. So in your journey as an author, can you give us like your whole, like a synopsis of your journey and what it took to get to this point of production and so forth?
And as I said, this was like my first book of actually doing it all myself. Like I've been a contributor to like a co-author and other books and stuff, but that was where, everybody took care of everything.
Right, yeah.
Whereas this was like from the beginning, it was me. So having to, first of all, realizing all the costs that were involved.
Yeah.
And, so knowing I was going to self-publish rather than try to find a publisher, because this book wanted to get out there as soon as it could get out there. And so that was the self-publishing route. But knowing some of the fees, what I ended up doing was doing a Kickstarter campaign. Right. So that helped me pay for the illustrations and a little bit towards some of the other costs. Not all the costs, but some of the costs. So, but just knowing things that you had to get in place was the editing and obviously the illustrator for a children's book.
Right.
Knowing who you're going to get it printed by. And actually, at least with my printer that I went for a certain package level that they take care of putting it, say, on Amazon.com
or
the Chapters Indigo website here in Canada. So at least that kind of part was taken care of. But, doing my own book launch and doing, kind of just putting it out there myself and trying to figure out, how to get it into, say, libraries. I didn't get it into schools. So that's still kind of a little part of the journey that I'm still on.
That's good. That's good. And what was the most challenging for you part of that journey?
I would say it would be the patience, waiting for all the little steps to happen. Because, I wrote it and it got edited by a few people to begin with, and then it was edited later on by the layout editor designer that I had. But the illustrations, I know illustrations can't be done in a minute, but it was that, come on, I want to be able to get this printed. So waiting for the illustrations was probably what I had to be most patient for.
That's good. That's good. Who pushed you along this journey as an author?
Well, at the very beginning, so kind of when I first was doing the self-development work, I do get coached by other coaches. It's
Yeah.
like you need to be coached sometimes in your
Yeah.
life. And when I had said that I had written this story just as kind of part of my own healing journey, and they go, "That's got to be published." I
Mm-hmm.
go, How do you do that?" But it was kind of their encouragement at the very beginning that made me realize it was time to actually learn how to do all that and get this
Right.
book out there. So yeah, it was like with my coaching, and then with kind of like the coaching group that I was with at the time too.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody kind of support. Yeah, having that support really helped.
Yeah. That really having the support and actually having somebody say, you got to do that. You
Yeah.
you may have thought of it later on, but it was just the time for that to happen. You know, along the journey of being an author, what emotions did you feel?
Well, with this book in particular, as I said, since it was starting out as my bit of my story,
Mm-hmm.
that was it was, is it nervous? Is it just being able to put myself out,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So, so kind of that at the beginning, it's like, do I not? Do I
Yeah.
dare?
Yeah.
So that trepidation, that
Mm-hmm.
not knowing whether I could actually go through with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I've also been a speaker before, so obviously I'm looking to speak with this book as well.
Right.
So being able to speak that part of my story is
Right.
another big thing as well. But I guess I've been there and done that before as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and sometimes it's those personal stories that people can relate to as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's like
It
just
had
all the
a
different
myriad of
things.
feelings, myriad all over the place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was very exciting when I first got my first box full,
Mm-hmm.
being able to hold that first book.
Yeah.
And it actually happened on like summer solstice back in June.
Okay.
So that was exciting.
Yeah, that was.
But I decided not to have the book launch though until August, so
Okay.
kind of after summer holidays. So it was I felt very supported during my book launch, being able just to see everybody that came out.
Mm-hmm.
Gratitude to everybody, because many people in that room were
Sure.
either ones that had backed the Kickstarter campaign or supported me somewhere along in the journey.
Mm-hmm.
So the book launch was a big thing as well.
Right. Right.
Just full of gratitude and so happy to see the people that came that evening.
That's good. That's good. So how can we, my audience, find you?
Well,
Social media.
the easiest way to find me personally
Mm-hmm.
is on my website.
Yes.
So that is wandadavis.ca.
Okay.
And or you can also email me at wandadavis.ca for more information.
Okay.
Now, as for the book From Head to Heart, you can find that on Amazon.com in the United States. You can find it on the Chapters Indigo website in Canada.
Okay.
And of course, I'm out there trying to get it into many libraries
Yeah.
as well. So you can always just request to have it in your library.
There you go. That's right.
Yeah.
Get that.
So
Get
those
it in
are
the
one of
library.
The easiest ways to find me.
Yes, absolutely.
And Facebook. I'm easy to find on Facebook.
Okay. Okay. And the last and final thing I'd like to ask you about your authorship and what you do. What do you have on the horizon? Anything special, like you're having another book launch or you're having a book signing? What do you have on the horizon?
I've already done a couple of book signings. I did one at the local Chapters
Okay.
Indigo store here
Okay.
in London, Ontario, which is
Okay.
where I am.
Right.
So yeah, I don't actually have any other book signings booked right now.
Okay.
I'm planning on doing some author visits in schools, so
Okay.
looking forward to doing that. So whether it's in person locally or whether it's online,
Yeah, right.
because
Okay.
right, because we've been through that area where now online learning and speaking is a thing, so that's
Yeah, it's a
easy
thing.
to do as well.
It's a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing. Just getting out there and promoting the book is what I'm kind of doing right now.
Okay. All right. Good. What are your final thoughts for my audience of who wants to be an author or anyone wants to go into business? Because, writing a book is a business. So, you want to make money from it. You want to move and, be speaking with it. So, you want to be creative with it. So give us some final thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, actually, one thing I was going to say, too, kind of going forward, I think this book will be the beginning of a series of
Right.
emotional
Okay.
Yeah. So, but going forward, I think the best thing for people is, and it's kind of one of the messages of the book, is to being true to you.
Right.
What exactly, if there's something that you really want to get out there, follow through somehow, some way, in order to make that happen. If you have a story or a book that you feel you want to write, just do it. Just start is kind of the biggest thing. Following your gut instinct as to perhaps what is the best route in order to put it out there. Is it going to be just released as an ebook? Is it going to be an actual print book? How do you plan on perhaps releasing it? Because there are so many different avenues now, and depending on what your plans are, it's whatever you feel is, go with whatever feels good.
Right.
Whatever they call it, either listening to your gut or following your instinct. What feels light for you instead of dragging you down? What feels good and moving you forward? Follow kind of your gut that way.
Wonderful. That is great information for our audience. Audience, I hope you heard that. This brings us to the end of the show. We want to thank you, audience, for listening. We want to thank our guest, Wanda Davis, for being here. And if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post it about on social media, or leave a rating and a review. To catch the latest from me, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at EJW Coaching. Thanks again to my guest, Wanda Davis, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me.